Uh, couple things. I said I would accept written comment until close of business on Wednesday, this Wednesday coming up. So people still have time to comment.
Mhm.
We have received comments from Donna Farias, who I think everybody agreed were certainly salient comments, including moving the definitions in the bylaw up to section 3 as opposed to section 8, whatever the heck it was.
Yeah.
And which makes a whole lot of sense to me. And then received some comments from the harbor master. And I can easily import these comments into the bylaw and regs. I think they're reasonable. I sent copies to everybody. I don't know if you've looked at them. One of which he, as part of the submittal requirements and the regulations, to require that they put the seaward extent of, structures over water, in degrees, minutes, and seconds, makes perfect sense to me. Then in a letter that he crafted, addressed to Mike on the 7th, he wanted to add aquaculture license holders to abutters for docks and pier projects, which I think makes a lot of sense. Even though they don't own the ground, they do own the lease, and they do have exclusive operating rights, and it could impede that. So I think that's a good idea. He made a comment.
Mark, would you do me a favor? Would you run that by me one more time? What you just said?
Sure. He asks us if we can incorporate within the definition of a butter, include aquaculture license holders.
All right. And if they don't, I think the owner of the property would have to be. Mike, this is your field of expertise.
Well, I thought that his request to include additional folks perhaps as abutters makes a great deal of sense when we're talking about a dock or a pier. Not just the property owner next door, but the abutting dock or pier would make a great deal of sense, because that's part of what his job is to determine how it impacts navigation. Obviously, shellfish beds, he doesn't need them, but I thought it was a good addition, and it gives us additional ammunition, if you will, if somebody's later on claiming that this newly approved dock is interfering with their use of theirs. They would have had a chance to come to the meeting and present their credible evidence.
Okay, all right.
I'm fine with that. It's only for that, and I think it's warranted.
Mike, are you suggesting that you are comfortable with aquaculture license holders to be incorporated into the definition? Okay, all right.
I am. I think, to me, it's the stakeholders.
Yeah.
And like I said a moment ago, he also wanted us to give notice to I think he said he wanted us to give notice to the folks who own the abutting docks and piers, which could be 2 properties away. It's not necessarily your next door neighbor.
Yeah, but he's also talking about moorings. That's awful tough to, for people to get those addresses and so on and so forth.
I mean, they'd just be going through him. I feel like it would make his life more difficult.
He has that information. You can see why an aquaculture leaseholder would be notified, because they have a significant economic issue. But in terms of docks or moorings or floats, he's licensing them. He knows where they are.
Yeah.
I didn't think that the moorings and the docks were that important. I liked the aquaculture thing.
Yeah, my feeling is that the stakeholders for docks and piers are often different than the presumed stakeholders for everything else, which is your abutters which is clearly a list that people get from whom? They get the list from the town assessors.
Yep, yep.
So, I mean, he is adding him to a little bit more to his workload, I suppose. But if we're asking people to give notice to various stakeholders, we have to let them know where to get the list. And whatever is on that list, we're going to have to abide by. So if somebody said, well, they didn't have my address on the list correctly, it's not like, it won't be the applicant's fault. Well, this is.
Well, I can incorporate them all. That's fine with me. In paragraph 3 on page 1, he indicates, I may have missed the definition in the bylaw, but business corporation or trust may not fit that definition. He's suggesting we change the term to entity. I don't know. I think that the definition is the standing definition for any person or persons, and that seems like a standard definition to me.
All right, let's think about that. So he wants to make it more generic. Right?
Yep.
So if you make it more generic, are you opening up to any possible issues here? I'm trying to think.
Mike, before we go any further, do we want to indicate that we don't have a quorum at this point? Officially?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone who's viewing this, please know, we're just, I guess, just discussing amongst ourselves. We do not have a quorum, so technically the meeting can't be opened. This is not right now, we are not in an open meeting because we don't have a quorum. So we're just noodling around. At some point, I suspect we'll have to stop noodling and declare the fact we don't have a quorum and we have to come up with a new date, unless by some miracle we can get one more person, one more commissioner on this call. But I got to tell you, I didn't think our definition of person was too narrow. It was pretty broad, I thought.
Yeah, I think it's very broad. I think it's, at some point you get to personal semantics, and I reread it and I thought that it was fine. If town council questions that, well, then we'll deal with that, because they're the official, if it's too broad or too narrow, or if it doesn't fit, they'll tell us.
Right. The only thing and I will leave it at this, I think we don't have to make a change if we're comfortable, even though some other people have made comments. Just because a comment's made doesn't mean we have to incorporate everyone's comments. Just so put that out there. Okay, so.
No, but I just want to discuss these so that, it's been discussed. I mean, I wish it was public, but it's not. In the 4th paragraph on the page, he alludes to the fact that he does not have access to the online permitting, which I know he doesn't. And he wants to create some sort of language by which gives him some preferential treatment. He already gets preferential treatment on doc filings. I personally email him all the information. He can't access it through Viewpoint, so I just get it to him.
Yeah, he does raise a good point, but from our standpoint, as Conservation Commission, it's up to us to get him the information and where we need his input. So we're already doing that. We're already doing it. It seems to me it's up to the town administration, if they want to use Viewpoint and have a portal for all, to make sure that they get everyone in the town who's supposed to chime in, get them access to the portal.
Right.
I mean, that's really not a conservation issue. That's a town administration issue.
Right.
But, you know, I don't think we need to put in our bylaws any special language about how we get. Because let's say, for instance, Mark, we do put in, oh, you know, the Conservation Commission will notify the harbor master, shellfish, executive. And then the town decides to give him access to Viewpoint and he's got it. Do we have to go back and amend the bylaws again? Because we don't need to do that special
Right,
treatment.
yeah.
I just think we leave it silent. I mean, it's been
Right.
working. There's nothing in the bylaws right now that tell us we have to do what we do.
Mhm.
You know, we have to get we want his input. It's vital to what we do. And then it's up to us to make sure we give him the information so he can then give us that very important, opinion. And there hasn't been a problem, has there, that I'm aware of, where
No.
he's not gotten the information from us.
No.
Yeah. I didn't think so. I mean, I didn't want to speak out of turn if there was, but I didn't
No,
remember.
we make every attempt to get it to him in a timely fashion.
Right.
He also questions whether 14 days is sufficient time to require written comments.
I think it is. Look, if you,
Yeah, it is. That's
some
it's for any
point,
of them.
I think it's more than sufficient. You look it over, you immediately point out what you think are issues, if there are any, or you say, I don't have any, or you don't say anything, which is deemed to be, I don't have any.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just holding the applicant up.
It should be 14 calendar days.
That's a long time, Richard.
Well, all right, the 14 days, I think you have to make a distinction between working days and calendar days.
No, I think unless you call it a business day, it's almost always by default a calendar day.
No,
Deadline.
I don't know about that. In my field, Mike, it's not. And there's a fine distinction in the statute where that's concerned. Business days or calendar days. And since surplusage does not vitiate, I think we should make the distinction.
All right, I mean, I'd go with, for 14 days, I'm talking calendar days. If you go business days,
Yeah,
you're giving them almost a month.
No, I agree with you. That's why I think, why not play it safe and make the distinction?
The practice has always been calendar days. It's never been said. Saying it doesn't hurt.
Well, you know what,
Thank you.
you know what, where it should go? It should go in the definitions. Days are calendar days unless otherwise noted.
Fine.
I don't know that you can do that because appeal periods are not are business days because they're shorter. Because it's
Right, but I said unless otherwise noted. So when you're looking at appeals, you'll say your appeals are so many business days from this date, and we'd be fine. Right? Because right now, if we're only saying days, I think Richard makes a good point. If we're only saying days, then what is it? Which day is it? And if
Yep.
and if you need business days, then we'll say it. Otherwise, in our definitions, we'll say a day is considered a calendar day unless it's otherwise noted, and we'll make those
Okay.
exceptions. Because I think your point's a good one. It's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
Some comments about incorporating contour lines as well as soundings, which I think is a good idea. I think most applicants do it, but it's not stated, so I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
He
No,
also-
some of these, though, I took to be things that we would put in our regulations versus the bylaws, which I think goes,
Well, he's commenting on both.
right. Yeah, but I mean, most of the
stuff
technical
now.
things of what he's looking for,
Regulation stuff.
yeah, it goes into regulations.
Yeah. Yeah, he talks about translocation plan as approved
Yeah.
Division of Marine Fisheries, which is how he functions. And I think that is the state law. So I think that would be where we mention, shellfish mitigation programs. We should probably put that language in.
Okay,
Then the last thing he mentioned, which I thought was something, and it just goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Mike. He talks about marked or designated navigation channels or specific activity zones within 100 feet of the proposed pier. You know, so that would include moorings and things like that. They need to show those and, you know, give some spatial location of those, I think.
I don't disagree with what he's looking for on the submittals to him. And I think we should incorporate those suggestions in our regulations. So what's presented to him, he's able to act on more quickly. It takes a little bit of the burden away from him. It's more accurate as well. And I think it makes for a better and more timely opinion.
I think it also, and I think you said this, I think I'm saying it in a different way. And I harken back to several of the dock and pier subcommittee meetings we've had. And everybody's trying to point fingers at everybody, trying to say, well, it's your responsibility, it's your responsibility. This information is stuff he needs. If he wants it on our plans, I don't see a problem with it. You know, they got to produce it anyway. So whether they produce it for us or them, you know, it's fine. And we do speak to, you know, navigation as being a concern of the commission, you know, how a project affects navigation. So that kind of works too. So, I mean, those were, he also had, moorings and floating docks. Those are not germane to us. They are germane to him. We don't deal with floating docks. Or swim floats, those are exempted, have been unless you want to incorporate them in. But we've not in the past, so that's really his bailiwick, and we speak to that in the regulations.
Yeah, I you know, I'd rather not take on more responsibility than we need to.
Oh,
And clearly this is Steve's expertise, and folks coming in for those things would need to deal with him, but I think I think he's giving us, this is in a perfect world, everything I'd love for you to incorporate, not all of it, like I said earlier. We would have to, just like we don't have to incorporate everything that anyone else would come up with. Those that we think make sense and add clarity, or certainly make in his suggestions for the regulations, make it easier for him to give a timely decision or a timely opinion, makes sense, because that'll help him more speedily get something to us, and ultimately that helps the applicant.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm all for it, you know, it saves him time, gets a decision out more quickly, and I think it makes for more accurate plans too, so for what it's worth. I thought that was a great suggestion for the regulations.
yep. Those were all for regular. He had very few on the bylaw.
Right.
So, you know, before we close this out, however we're going to do that, as I said earlier, public notice allows for comments to be received up to close of business on Wednesday. I will forward any comments I get to you. Would certainly appreciate response back if you have any thoughts, yay or nay. They can compile what we know and what we have, and put together an updated draft for review. The question I have is, and I think Richard, you mentioned it, I read it in the minutes, and maybe somebody else mentioned it, about not having had town council review any of this yet. And I can certainly send copies to them, you know, ahead of time, if that's what you want. I have been talking to Brian, and Brian was really waiting to hear what happened after tonight. So, you know, before he really chose to get involved. Again, the time constraint is really on the bylaw. because that has to meet the town meeting warrant article schedule. When you think about it, we can actually play around with the regulations for many more weeks. Because they don't go into effect until, because they speak to the bylaw, and they don't go into effect until the bylaw goes into effect. And that's a town meeting vote, yay, and then it's the Attorney General signing off on it. So in reality, I know there's been some concern about schedule, but the fact is that if all of this goes according to plan, we probably won't have an approved bylaw until the end of the summer, early next fall.
Mhm.
Before we can start implementing the new stuff. Well, we were talking about 8, 9 months out, so there's still time out there. And in all that time, we can still work through the regulations and get those tightened up a little bit. But I don't think it's a bad idea to keep that document fluid and organic with suggestions and things like that.
Yeah, I think I was one of the folks that was speaking about town council not having reviewed, but towards the latter part of the meeting, I think I kind of got a little waffly there, but I said, my bigger concern was if we went with the massive change where we had a very tiny little bylaw and everything was in the regulations, I wouldn't want to have something taken out that town council says you can't take that out. To do what we've been talking about tonight and what we've seen so far, I'm not as concerned in terms of the bylaws. I'm not as concerned about town council needing to advise us because what we're adding, if you boiled it all down, aside from some grammatical changes, we're adding things relative to the viewpoint, which we don't call viewpoint, and we're adding definitions. But we're not really taking anything out of consequence. So I'm less concerned about that. If I were going to do this in a perfect world, I'd go radical on the bylaw and make it very, very small and give us the jurisdiction to do what we need, and everything we need to do, we're basically doing through the regulations, streamlining the amendment process, but also being able to hand an applicant, here you go. It's all in here from soup to nuts, all the definitions, all the things you need to do to apply. What are your requirements for the plans? All that stuff's in here. This is just telling us we have the jurisdiction to do this. And in a perfect world, that's what I'd want, but I wouldn't do that without the advice of town council, because now I'm making a radical change to what's historically been our bylaw. And I don't want to find out that, we've just taken things out that made a difference and we shouldn't have done that. So
that's kind of why I stuck with the framework of the previous bylaw, or the existing bylaw, I should say, because that has been reviewed by town council. I mean, so, maybe there's a difference of opinion amongst council, and I get that, but I mean, the document stands, with some legal credibility. We haven't really changed it except for tweaking it. I mean, we haven't done anything. We've specified some definitions. But we haven't really changed anything. And one of the things I want to say, and this is based on my years in writing for bylaws for Plymouth and, committees, going to boards in Plymouth, sometimes radical change is dangerous because it is so scary. Nobody wants to make that change. And we're living in, conservation commissions and wetlands are a very, very tenuous subject with people. It's great when it's not your property. When it's your property, what do you mean? You can't do that. So from my standpoint, draconian change in a bylaw or in regulations relative to wetlands, I think is tantamount to failure at town meeting or at an approval, at any kind of approval. So, I've taken what I consider a moderate step. I don't think it's conservative, it's moderate, but I haven't draconianly changed things. I've made suggestions, and I think these comments are not draconian either. You know, we've briefly discussed, so, this idea of trying to get to some goal, you know, revolution is great if you can take it. Evolution is a lot better because it's less painful.
I know, but I can't wait, you know, just an impatient person.
Well, you know, sometimes you gotta hand it off to somebody else to close the deal, Mike.
I understand that. Well, that's why look, I came from one position, I've evolved into another, saying, I think you got to take this step. But ultimately, what I'd like to see is that revolution, if you will. But I don't want to, and I won't do. I think it'd be absolutely asinine to do it without a much longer process. The town council is involved at multiple steps, so we don't do anything that's violative of the Constitution or the town charter, or, you know, or we're opening ourselves up to an issue that's going to be essentially a negative for the town. It takes a lot more thought, a lot more care when you're going to do something as radical as that versus the tweaks, right? I mean, it just is, because the framework is still there. You didn't pull it apart. You've left your framework, you're just doing tweaks to it, you know, so you painted the trim different color, but it's still the same building. And I'm okay with that. At this point, I'm okay. I don't want to take that radical step without a lot more thought and deliberation and input, particularly from town council.
Mike, it is nothing but a recipe for disaster. If we
Thank
do
you. I'm
not
always good
have-
at that.
Excuse me?
I'm
It is
pretty
a-
good at that.
A recipe for disaster if we do not have the advice of town council, especially where it's needed. The impact of what we're trying to do will only be made more valuable with the review and approval of town council. Period.
I agree with you, Richard. I mean, if we were coming in with this very Mike Kehoe radical idea, and I'm a town meeting member, what do you think the first thing I'm going to ask?
Town
Has
council.
town council reviewed this? And if the answer is no, well, you can pretty much guess where that's going.
Well, but let's understand, this can't go to town meeting without town council review. We just
Understood.
happened to us. The question here is, when does town council get it?
Right.
Should they get it yesterday? Do they get it today? Or can we wait a week and a half to give it to?
Bingo. You win the prize, Mark.
Review it.
No, I understand. You know, I honestly, you know, here, that's the timing, in my experience, has always been the earlier the better, because if there's some issue, you have chance to sort of spin it a little bit and get the change done in time for it still to make the warrant. But, you know, if not, you just have to hope you've done a good job.
And coming to Brian, based on my last conversation with him, we are not in crisis time for him. Okay, relative to the bylaw, the regulations, we can set aside. He's gonna look at those, because he has to look at the regulations as they relate to the bylaw. Okay, he's gonna concentrate on the bylaw, because when I write the draft warrant article, it's about for the town meeting to approve the modified wetland protection bylaw. Period. You know, that's what the request is. There's nothing to do with the regulations.
No, I agree. I mean, I definitely agree. I don't think we're saying the different thing, Mark.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Chairman, how do you want to wrap this?
Well, we've now gone about 50 minutes past the start time, and we don't have a quorum, so it's pretty evident we're not going to have one. So at this point, I would have to say we never really opened the public meeting. We don't have a quorum. We're going to have to reschedule the public meeting to comply with the town bylaw, not the town regulations.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're going to have to do that. I don't know when we do it. Kelly's offered a suggestion that we do it at our next scheduled meeting of the Conservation Commission. And maybe the thing to do is start it early and I hate doing it to applicants, but I don't know any other way to do it. You know, to go from 6 to 7, we'll have to do a hard stop at 7. I mean, and then maybe what we could do at that point would be to, after opening the public hearing, taking out of order item for discussion and finishing up within 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Whatever we started at
Or-
6.
Or we can table and pick it up during discussion.
We could. And we could. But I do think that the suggestion of doing it the same day is a good one. And how we do it, I think we should probably try to start earlier on this only, and then go into the public hearing, the normally scheduled public hearing. So we would have to table it and say we will continue this as an item for discussion at the upcoming public hearing, which starts at 7 o'clock. And the items
I
for
can-
discussion will be, we'll just do the number one item for discussion will be finishing what we started if we didn't finish it already.
I concur.
Okay, so my question is, do you want to start at 6 or do you want to start at 5:30?
Well, that's a good question. Now I'm doing it solely in self-interest. I just need to get some fuel in the old belly. So, if we do it at
Yeah.
5:30, that means chances are we'll be eating on screen, which is never a good look, I guess.
I say
As
let's
I
go
said-
with 6. That'd
Hey,
be-
6
Yes, I
p.m.
think so.
Say that again, Kelly. I didn't hear you.
Let's go with 6. I think 5:30 is tough for a lot of us to get fed and and be helpful
Yeah, I mean,
humans.
even for me, I mean, sometimes just to get out the door, I wouldn't even
Exactly.
get home by 5:30.
Exactly. Yeah, I know that would be a tough one for Nat. It's okay for me, but it just that I know. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
better.
that's
to-
fine, I just threw it out. That's.
No, I hear you. I mean, I understand if you started at 5:30, you might actually finish it by 7, but it just it wouldn't work for me. I know I'd be as late as I was tonight. I'd be this late again, and then being hungry, I'd probably be eating snacks while I'm watching, which would never, like I say, it would look kind of awful, Look at that guy eating.
Turn the camera off.
Yeah, that's not a good look either. Then they think
I
you've
know.
left. Then they think you've left somewhere,
I'm being facetious, Mike.
I know. Maybe if I had table manners, it wouldn't be so bad, but
Let's not get ridiculous now.
Yes. Now, now we're pushing it, aren't we?
Really, come on.
All right. Do you
Not
want to
gonna
call
bother.
the meeting now? Do you want?
yeah, I think we will. So from what we're going to do for anyone watching, this meeting was never officially opened. It was never opened because we didn't have a quorum. And as such, what we've just done is we're going to authorize our environmental affairs coordinator to re-advertise for this meeting to occur at 6 o'clock p.m. before our next public meeting of the Conservation Commission, which is that next Tuesday?
It is next Tuesday.
So
A week from tomorrow.
a week
Week
from
from
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
So it'll be the 21st, right?
Yes.
So that's when we'll have this. It'll be at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 21st of February, 2023. And if a quorum is present, we will open the public meeting on the bylaw amendment. If we conclude all of our work in that 1 hour, that'll be wonderful. We will then start the regularly scheduled Conservation Commission public meeting at 7 p.m. If we haven't concluded, we will then take up the bylaw amendment as a item for discussion during the regularly scheduled Conservation Commission meeting. And our meetings, usually we get to the items for discussion sometime around 8 o'clock, 8:15. So to give folks who are listening an idea, if you don't have a horse in the race for the public portion of it, but you just want to see the finish of this, you can go grab a bite to eat and come back in, join us. Glad to have you.
Mike, just as a point of order, you said bylaw amendment. This public hearing was supposed to be bylaw and comments on bylaw and regulations. You want to include regulations in your?
Yes,
We can, but if we don't get any other comments from the public, I think our focus, in order to get it accomplished, should just be the bylaw.
I agree with you. That's our focus, but we're having a forum here.
Yeah,
And-
so you're right. So that being said,
What I'm suggesting is that the public hearing would be on review comments on the draft bylaw amendments and the draft regulation amendments.
correct. We have to be consistent with what this meeting was.
Right, exactly.
I agree with that.
I
So I
agree.
stand corrected on what I said the
Okay.
topic was.
And I will not be legally advertising in the newspaper again. As we are continuing this, or we're postponing this until the 21st. I will do a public notice and post it on the web page and on the conservation page, as I did before. I don't know if I'm gonna get the bulletin board out in front of town hall again.
We'll see. If we don't, we don't, but yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do the best we can.
Yep, okay,
All right, we don't need a motion to adjourn because it wasn't ever opened, so